Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, shalom. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Trumpet's Call. I'm AmarYaH. I pray that you are holding on to faith, Amunah, and holding on to hope, Tekuah, during these times. Thank you for joining me once again on the channel and for another session of our Turah Tidbit. In today's session of our Turah Tidbit, we're going to be addressing a question that I've been asked on a few occasions. And so I've taken this issue to prayer, and I pray that the counsel that is provided today gives a sure word for us so that we can proceed ahead with confidence that this is Abba's will for us at this time. And so the question that I've been asked on a number of occasions is, should women pray or prophesy with their head covered? And so, as with anything, I seek the Most High Yahuwah for His will and for His guidance, and I go to Scripture. And also, it becomes necessary to look at a little bit of history, cultural history, to see what was done in the past so that we can derive an answer that is satisfactory, not necessarily to us and what we think or what we feel, but one that is satisfactory to the Most High Yahuwah, because it is Him, it is He that we desire to please. So let's get started for today. The question on the table is, are women required to cover their heads when praying or prophesying? We're going to begin in the book of Corinthians where this topic is discussed. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1 through 7. Be ye therefore followers of me. Now this is the Apostle Paul speaking, and he's instructing those he's writing to at the assembly at Corinth to be followers of him. He says, even as I am also a follower of Mashiach. So he's saying, follow me as I follow Messiah. And so what he's presenting here is the witness and the testimony and the wisdom that he has received from our Messiah by way of the Ruach. Okay? So this is what he's presenting. He says, now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I delivered them unto you. Ordinance is another word for judgments, okay? Rulings, judgments. There are many ordinances that has to be handed down to address a number of topics as we're attempting to live our lives before the Father. And so it's important that we keep the ordinances as the Apostle Shaul is instructing us to do here in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. In verse 3 it reads, but I would have you know that the head of every man is Mashiach. Now I have in brackets their person, because the way that this word is used, it can't simply mean the head of every man is Mashiach, but Mashiach isn't the head of every woman. Okay, so that's not what it's saying there. It's man as in mankind, those who are submitted and surrendered to the Most High Yahuwah through His Son, and even those who aren't submitted. Okay, Yahusha, Mashiach, is the head. He is the leader. And the head of the woman is the man. And once again, in the brackets, I have the word married, because the head of every woman is not every man. Every woman is not under the authority of every man. The married woman is under the authority of her husband. The daughter is under the authority of her father. Okay? So not every random man has authority over every random woman. That's not what Scripture teaches. Restating, the head of the married woman is the man. And in brackets there, I have the husband. Once again, not every man has authority over a married woman, only her husband. So the head of every married woman is the husband of that woman. And the head of Mashiach is Yahuwah. All praises to the Most High. So the Apostle Shaul has presented here a beautiful chain of authority for us to understand. Yahuwah is head over all. Then comes Yahusha. Then comes the husband. Then the wife. Okay? And then the children are under them. Verse 4. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. And his head, according to how we understand it, the way it's just been described for us, is Mashiach. The head of every man is Mashiach. So if a man prays or prophesies with his head covered, he's dishonoring Mashiach, who is the man's head. And actually, he's the woman's head as well. Okay? But let's continue. But every married woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Now, the woman's head is her husband. But you could also say that she dishonors herself. So she dishonors her own head, meaning her own personhood. She also dishonors her husband. And because Yahusha is the head of us all, she also dishonors Yahusha. Okay? So there's a threefold offense if a woman is to pray or prophesy with her head uncovered. All right, let's continue. For that is even all one, as if she were shaven. For if the married woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. For a woman to present herself unveiled in public would be for her to reject and thumb her nose at all of the societal rules and mores at that time. For a woman to have no hair and have her be shaven in public, it's a sign of shame, public shame. So the Apostle Shaul is saying, if a woman prays or prophesies with her head uncovered, it's shameful. If she's out in the streets with her head shaved, it's shameful. It's the same thing. So he's saying, if she's going to pray and prophesy with her head uncovered, she may as well go all the way and shave all of her hair off. So this is what he's saying. So I know he's saying this for dramatic effect, but this is how important this is to him as he's describing this, that there's great shame in a woman praying and prophesying with her head uncovered. There's great shame in a woman out in those streets with her head shaved. Okay? So it's the same thing in his eyes. So let's continue. We're going to go to the Greek and we're going to look up this word head just to confirm what's being said here about the head of Messiah and the head of the husband and the head of the wife. That word in the Greek is kephale, and it's defined as head. Head, heads, chief, hair, or very, okay? It's used in the sense of the head or as in the parts that's readily taken a hold of. The way that this word is used in the passage that we just read, the best definition here is chief or leader or ruler, authority, okay? Let's continue. We're also going to look up the word dishonors because Mashiach is dishonored if a man's head is covered while he prays or prophesies, and the husband is dishonored if his wife is uncovered. And so let's look up this word dishonor to see what we can learn about it. And it is the Greek word, it's a mouthful, it's kat aski kuhuno. Kat ahi skuhuno. And it means confound, to confound, it's a verb, so it means to confound, dishonor, make a shame-faced. So there's an idea here that this action is leading to the person who's being dishonored having shame. It also means to shame down. I like the way that's read. To shame down. To take an action that someone has performed and cast shame onto another person as a result of their action. Or to cast shame onto oneself as a result of one's action. It means to disgrace, or by implication, to put to a blush. When someone is embarrassed or ashamed, they will often blush. Yes, black people blush too. You may not see it, but black people blush, okay? So to put the shame down to is to make someone blush, to make someone feel disgraced, dishonored, or shame-faced. As we continue, we're going to look up the Greek and the Hebrew, or the abarith, for the word veil. So as we have been talking about a woman being uncovered, we need to specify what she's being covered or uncovered with. And in the Greek, this word is 2571, and it is kaluma, and it is simply a veil, or a cover, something that covers the head and often the face or part of the face. It can be described as a flowy piece of fabric that would cover the head, oftentimes the shoulders, going down to the back, in which a woman can cover her head and part of her face. So this is the word in the Greek, kaluma. In the Hebrew, the word veil is saif, and it simply means a veil. It is from an unused root meaning to wrap over or a veil. So you can see a long flowy piece of fabric, or what we would call a shawl, that you could use to wrap around yourself. Okay, so this is what is being employed. This is the language that's being employed when we talk about a woman not being covered. It's not being covered with a veil or some sort of fabric that would cover her head and her shoulders. Okay? So as we continue on, I want you to have that imagery in your head of a flowy piece of fabric that is a veil. Okay? So let's continue. We're going to be reading this article because it's going to help us to understand the culture of the time regarding head covering. Okay? And so it is entitled, "Why Did Rebecca Cover Her Face with a Veil?" in Genesis 24, 64 through 65. And what does it reveal about ancient marriage customs? Okay? Let's begin. The account of Rebecca's first meeting with Isaac, Genesis 24, offers a rich portrayal of ancient Near Eastern marriage customs. A striking cultural detail appears in Genesis 24, 64 through 65, and it reads, "When Rebecca, or Rabka, raised her eyes and saw Isaac, Yatzak, she dismounted from the camel. Then she said to the servant," and that servant was Eleazar, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. Now, up until this time, her veil was not covering herself. She had been traveling with Eleazar, who is a man, and the other servants that may have gone along with him to accompany him, they were men. So she was traveling in the presence of at least one man without her veil on, without herself being covered, okay? But once she saw the man that she was to marry, she covered herself, okay? That's very significant. So let's continue. The act of covering her face with a veil is more than a gesture of modesty. It reflects the cultural, social, and symbolic practices surrounding marriage in the patriarchal period. Understanding the significance of the veil in this context provides insight into the customs, values, and expectations that shape marital relationships in biblical times. Let's continue. In Mesopotamian law codes, such as the Code of Hammurabi, circa 1754 before Common Era, veiling was legally regulated. Married women and betrothed women were required to wear veils, while slaves and prostitutes were prohibited from doing so. Now, this is according to the Code of Hammurabi, which is a Babylonian legal text composed sometime around 1755 or 1750 BC, okay, before Common Era. It is a book of rules and regulations to govern how people lived in ancient Babylon, okay? So according to the Code of Hammurabi, women, married women, and betrothed women were required to wear veils. Prostitutes and slaves were prohibited from doing so. Veiling, therefore, was a sign of dignity, honor, and protection, marking a woman as belonging to a household. So the minute Rabka, saw Yatzak, the man that she was to marry, she covered herself with a veil. In doing so, she said yes. Now, she had already said yes by coming along on this long journey to meet this man, to marry this man. But when she saw him and she covered herself with her veil, she marked herself as a woman married, not only betrothed, but married. Okay? The only thing that was needed was the physical act of consummating the marriage to make it completely legal. But she said yes by covering herself with that veil. Rebekah's act of veiling herself upon meeting Isaac, Yitzhak, reflects this cultural understanding. It was a symbolic declaration that she was now under the covenant of marriage and that her identity was united with Yitzhak. Her veil communicated her status as a bride, not merely to Isaac or Yitzhak, but to all who witnessed the meeting. That spoke. What she did in that moment spoke. It spoke loudly, even though she said not a word. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So we're going to continue on to see how this veil or this covering of oneself really demonstrates to us what our cultural practices were back then, back in the day. So we're going to look up the word that's used for covering in this passage that we just read, and it is the Hebrew word kasa, and it is kasa, kasa. It is a verb, and it means to clad self, to close or to clothe, to conceal, to cover self, to flee to hide, to overwhelm. But the idea here is a covering or a concealing or an engulfing, okay? To cover for the purpose of secrecy, all right? So Rabka, covered herself and hid herself is an indication of modesty before her husband. Also, now that she had seen him and said yes once again in her actions, to cover herself in the presence of those other men was necessary. A woman was not to at that time go around uncovered in the presence of other men if she were married. That was the custom. Okay? Let's continue. In AmarYaH, chapter 61, verse 10, we read, I will greatly rejoice in Yahuwah. My soul shall be joyful in my Elohim, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decks himself with ornaments, or pa'ar, and a bride adorns herself with jewels. So, it reads at the bottom here, thus, Rebekah's veil was an outward expression of inward honor, signaling her willingness to enter into a covenant relationship with Yitzhak in purity and in propriety. All of that was communicated in that simple outward action of covering herself with a veil. She is now hidden in Yitzhak's tents. She's hidden under his skirt. She's hidden in covenant relationship with him. She's been covered. Continuing. The veil as a symbol of marital covenant. Rebekah's act of veiling herself immediately upon learning Yitzhak's identity symbolizes her transition from one household to another, from her father's house to her husband's house. In ancient Near Eastern culture, marriage was not merely a personal relationship, but a covenant that united families. The giving of a bride often involved elaborate rituals signifying the change in her social status. Veiling was one such ritual, marking the woman's separation from her family and her consecration to her husband. The concept of covering as a sign of covenant relationship is echoed throughout the scripture. For example, in Yakazakal or Ezekiel chapter 8, Yahuwah uses the imagery of covering to symbolize his covenant with Yerushalayim. And so let's read that. And it reads, When I passed by you again, I saw you. Behold, you were at the age for love. And I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered kasa, your nakedness. I made my vow to you and entered into a covenant with you, declares Yahuwah Elohim, and you became mine. All praises to the Most High Yahuwah. So the Father covered Yasharal with his skirts, indicating that we are now in covenant relationship. I have covered you When a woman covers herself with a veil upon saying yes to a marriage proposal, she's not only saying yes to the marriage proposal, but she's also indicating in her action that she has come up under the skirts or the covering of her husband. So the Father covered us with his garment. So this is beautiful. It's beautiful. So let's continue. Veiling as a sign of anticipation and submission. Another dimension of Rebecca's veiling is that it expresses submission, not in a modern, distorted sense, but in the biblical sense of mutual roles within a covenant relationship. Rebecca's covering her face was a gesture of her consent to the marriage and her acceptance of Isaac's role, Yitzhak's role, as her husband. It was an acknowledgement of the structure of the marital relationship as designed by Yahuwah, where both husband and wife fulfill complementary roles. And so she said yes. Once again, she said yes. And she would have understood the importance of that action because she grew up in that culture and knew exactly what to do. A woman was covered and protected, veiled. There were certain rights and privileges and protections afforded to her when she was veiled because it signaled that she was either betrothed or that she was already married. Okay? And so just in a simple act of what you're wearing affords a protection to you and also status. She had the status of a married woman just by what she wore and not even by what she said. The veil is also a sign of submission. And so as the woman wears the veil, she is signaling to the world and especially to her husband that she is submitted under his authority. And that is pleasing to her husband and to her master, Yahushua HaMashiach. And in the process, she honors herself. We'll now read Song of Shalomah, chapter 4, verse 1, and it reads, Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. In this passage, we see that the beautiful bride, the virgin, the one who was betrothed to the man in these songs, she is wearing a veil. It is a sign of her betrothal. It is a sign of her eager anticipation of his arrival. And as we anticipate the arrival of our bridegroom, we should all be veiled. And I'm not necessarily talking about physically veiled, although that is a possibility. I'm talking about being veiled with the Ruach, and being veiled with righteousness, and veiled with humility, and veiled with kindness, and veiled with forgiveness, and veiled with the beauty and the aroma of the presence of the Most High Yahuwah. We should be veiled. All praises to the Most High. Let's continue. Conclusion. Rebecca's act of covering her face with a veil in Genesis 24 is far more than a cultural formality. It is a profound expression of modesty, honor, and covenant. It reflects the values of the patriarchal society where marriage was a sacred institution, marked by visible signs of commitment and respect. The veil signified Rebecca's transition into a new family, her consent to the marriage covenant, and her willingness to submit to Yahuwah's plan for her life. This ancient custom, rich with meaning, reminds readers that marriage is not merely a human contract, but a sacred bond established by Yahuwah. Through Rebecca's veil, we glimpse the beauty of covenantal relationships, not only between husband and wife, but also between Yahuwah and his people. All praises to the Most High. All praises to the Most High. So we have read this little article to give an indication of the importance of the covering of the veil and what it signified, okay? It signified coming up under the household or being in covenant relationship with Yatsah, but it also signified his authority over her. She is now honor bound to reverence, respect, and obey her husband. So the veil represents not only her marriage covenant and all of the benefits that it affords her now as a married woman, it also represents the authority that she's under. Okay? Headship. She's under the headship of Yatsah. So let's go back to the passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Okay? We'll focus in on verse 4. And it reads, "But every married woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, her husband. For that is even all one as if she were shaven. For if the married woman be not covered, let her also be shorn." Okay? And then he says, "But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered." So he's equating being shorn or shaven, meaning her hair. If her hair is shaven, that's a shame to her. To be uncovered while praying or prophesying is a shame to her. They're the same thing, okay? Both actions result in a shame for the woman. Why? Why is it shameful for a woman to pray or prophesy without her head being covered? Because of what we just read. We recognize that a woman being covered with a veil, a married woman being covered with a veil, is a sign of her commitment to her marriage, her honor of her husband, and being under his headship and his authority. Let's continue. We're going to read this article that talks about the custom of women during the time of the first century. It was customary for most women in the ancient Near East, Mesopotamia, and the Greco-Roman world to cover their hair when they were outside of their home. In biblical times, women covered their heads with veils or scarves. The unveiling of a woman's hair was considered a humiliation and punishment. See Isaiah chapter 3, verse 17, and Numbers chapter 5, verse 18. On the loosening of the hair of a woman suspected of adultery. Okay? It is a humiliation and a punishment. And so you have on the screen here an image found in the catacombs of a woman who's praying with her head covered. And so notice she's lifting up hands to heaven and her head is covered with a veil. In Talmudic times, too, married women were enjoined to cover their hair in communal spaces. In a society so highly conscious of sexuality and its dangers, veiling was considered an absolute necessity to maintain modesty and chastity. If a woman walked bareheaded in the street, her husband could divorce her without repaying her dowry. Girls did not have to cover their hair until the wedding ceremony. It gradually became the accepted traditional custom for all Jewish women to cover their hair. So girls were not required to cover their hair until the ceremony. So we see Rabka traveling. She was a young girl, a young woman, traveling to her husband. As soon as she arrived, she covered her hair. So to summarize, should women cover their heads when praying or prophesying? The answer, based on the scriptures that we've read and the historical content that we have uncovered, indicates that married women are expected to cover their heads while they're praying or prophesying. It is something that has become a cultural imperative, although it has become lost to us due to slavery and due to desolations. We have not been in our land. We have not been identified with the culture, and so it's something that we haven't practiced. Although I do recall growing up in a holiness church, and the women there covered their heads. Whenever they stepped into the church building, they had these lace coverings that they would always cover their heads. The young girls didn't, but the ladies did. Whether they were married or not, they covered their heads. And so that was something that existed even within Christianity in the early days. but it's been lost to us in modern times. I believe that it speaks and it harkens back to a time when women were covered and they knew that they were covered by their relationships with their husbands and also their relationship with our Messiah. When we come before the Father and we understand that we are covered by Messiah, He is our covering, whether we're male or female. And we also understand that as married women, we are covered by our husbands. As daughters, we are covered by our earthly fathers. It lends a sense of security and it lends a sense of humility as we come before the Father and submit ourselves to Him as we are submitting ourselves to our husbands and to our fathers and to those who have the rule over us. It also signals that as we come before the Father in prayer, we are desiring to honor all of the areas in our lives in which we are called to submit and called to surrender. And when we come before the Father in that way, it's as if we come humble. We come ready to receive from Him because we check all of the boxes. We say, Father, I'm coming before you with thanksgiving in my mouth, with your name on my lips, and I'm coming before you humbly. I'm coming before you acknowledging the authority that you've placed over me, whether it's my father because I'm unmarried or whether it's my husband because I am. And we all ultimately identify with the authority that's been granted to the Most High Son, Yahushua, as He's been given the rule over us. So, is it required that women cover their heads while they're praying or prophesying? As I said, it's a cultural imperative. It's something that the Apostle Shaul felt very strongly about. It's been lost to us in our current culture, but it's time for us to get back to those things that we once did that meant something. And what did it mean? What did it mean for a woman to wear a veil on her head? It was a sign that she had been claimed by someone, either because she was married to a man or because she was the daughter of a father who would one day match her in marriage to an eligible man who would take care of her and cover her with his skirts. It's a sign that a woman has been brought into the tent of her husband or that she resides in the tent of her father and he is master and ruler over that tent, over that great house, in the same way that our Heavenly Father is master, ruler, possessor of the great tent in heaven and all the world and everything that He has created. It's a sign of chastity. It's a sign of protection. It's a sign of being a part of a culture that's greater than what we have known in the American culture. It's a sign of beauty. There are not many more beautiful things than seeing a woman veiled. The simple act of modesty and the simple act of submission makes a woman even more beautiful than if she were not wearing that outward sign. Another thing that the veil represents is submission. When a woman wears a veil, it indicates her submission to the authority of her husband or to the authority of her father, to the authority of Yahushua HaMashiach, to the authority ultimately of the Most High Yahuwah. There is such a beauty in a woman under authority, covered under authority. There, she is safe, she is protected, she is cared for, she is beautiful, she's going to be profitable to her husband or to her father. She is desired. May we all endeavor to be such women who are under cover, and we allow that covering to be made known to the world and be made manifest by the way we dress ourselves. When you make an effort to return to the culture and to do the things that Abba has called us to do, He sees. He sees our efforts as we try to unlearn the things that we learned in Babylon and relearn our culture and our cultural identity. That's another thing that wearing a veil does for us. It marks us as children of Yaakov, children of Yasharal, children of the Most High Yahuwah, daughters of Zion, in whom there is no guile, in whom there is no shame. because we have been claimed, covered. All praises to the Most High. So let's talk about a few questions that you may have. If you're single, do you have to cover your head when you're praying or prophesying? According to the scriptures that we've read, according to our understanding of what the Apostle Shaul is saying, the answer would be no. You're not required, nor are you being asked to cover your head if you are unmarried when you're praying or prophesying. However, if you desire to be married one day, you may want to get into the habit of praying with your heads covered if that is something that you desire in the future. And when you do cover your heads as a single woman, you're acknowledging the authority that your father still has over you, and you're acknowledging the authority that Yahushua HaMashiach, our master, has over you. Another question that you may be pondering: what about praying in private or praying in public? Does it matter? Should I cover my head when I'm praying in private and in public? You're praying to the Father who sees you publicly and privately. And so the answer would be yes. If you're covering your head for the purpose of honoring the authority your husband has over you, that honor extends publicly and privately. So it would be a yes. You should do it publicly and privately. Here's another question that you may have. Is it sin? If I don't cover my head when I pray or prophesy, am I sinning against the Most High? If Abba tells you to do it and you don't do it, then it's sin. If he tells you to operate in Amunah and you don't operate in Amunah, that is sin. Because the scripture says, for him who knoweth to do right and doeth it not, to him or to her it is sin. So the scriptures are telling us that for a woman to cover her head, it's a sign that she is under authority. Now, you can choose to do it or not choose to do it. That's between you and the Most High. But if you obey the commandment, if you obey the judgment or the ordinance with an understanding that this is something that Abba has allowed to become a part of our culture, then you would engage in that practice and you would do so with joy. But if you believe that it's not for us today, if you believe we're living in modern times, we don't have to do such things, and you honestly believe that Abba does not hold you responsible nor accountable, and he is not convicting your heart regarding it, then you have your answer from the Most High, okay? As we are seeking to regain our sense of culture and the things that have been lost to us, this practice of a woman praying or prophesying with her head covered is cultural. And it's also spiritual. It signals something. And so if you are not convicted in your heart against doing it, it's a good practice to adopt. Here's another question that you may be considering. If I have prayed in the past and prophesied in the past, and the Father spoke to me or he prophesied through me, doesn't that mean that I'm not required to pray or prophesy with head covered if I have prayed or prophesied with head uncovered in the past and the Most High actually spoke through me? Wasn't he giving me his seal of approval by prophesying through me with my head uncovered? That's a very good question. It's a very good consideration. I also want you to ask yourself, are there things that you have done in the past that Abba gave you a pass on, or he winked at that thing that you did, even though when time had passed, you matured a bit, you grew up a little bit more in him, and you determined that that thing was not something you're supposed to engage in? I wasn't supposed to be doing that. But Abba didn't convict me about it then, but he's convicting me about it now. Have you ever had any of those experiences? I would surmise that you have. We're all at varying levels of maturing. We're growing up into Messiah. We're becoming conformed to the image of our Master. And there are things that Abba points his attention and points his finger at in our lives at varying stages of our maturation and growth. And so prophesying or praying with your head uncovered in the past and having Abba actually speak through you and to you during that time may have been fine for that time. But when the word comes from heaven and says, I want you to make this change, you need to be doing this, and you say, well, I haven't done it in the past. I don't think I'm going to do it now. Is that sin? Is that direct disobedience? So for each of us as married women and as single women, we have to go to Abba and allow him to guide us in how we are to proceed. I personally would not want anything to stand between me and my Father. And if I'm being told to cover my head when I pray or prophesy, to the best of my ability, I will attempt to do that. Now, there may be times when Abba speaks and I'm not in a position to cover my head with a veil, but I do tend to keep my head covered with a hat, and so that has to be good enough, right? There may be times when Abba's giving you something for someone and you're not covered. In that moment, go with it and allow him to speak. To the best of our ability, we should all strive to obey the Father and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. And covering our heads with a veil while we're praying or prophesying, it's such an easy thing. It's not hard. It's not grievous. And what it signals is so beautiful. It's so beautiful to think that as I cover my head, I'm honoring my husband, my head, and I'm honoring ultimately the head of my husband, who is Mashiach, who is also my head. So it's a very honoring thing that the Father has established, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful that he is allowing these things to be returned to our culture and returned to our understanding so that we can do these things, not because we feel as if we're going to gain brownie points with the Most High or that he would be angry with us. We're doing it because we love him. We obey him because we love him. And we keep the commandment with regard to our husbands and with regard to our Messiah because we love our husbands and we love our Messiah. As we have come to the end of this lesson for today, I encourage each of you ladies, whether you're married or unmarried, to take this matter before the Father and see what he says to you. And if he lays it on your heart to make an effort to cover your heads while you're praying or prophesying, do that. Do that. If he doesn't, then do that. Let every woman or every man be fully persuaded so that we might obey the Father and do what he's calling us to do because he's laying it on our hearts and he's spoken it in his word. Okay? Hallelujah. I'm so grateful to the Father for his goodness to us and how he's restoring unto us an understanding of our culture and the things that we did in the past and why we did them. There's a meaning to everything that we do and everything that Abba asks us to do. So I choose to pray with my head covered as much as I can, and I do so in honor of the Father, in honor of his beautiful Son, and in honor of my Ish, my husband. And I'm thankful to the Father for allowing us to have that understanding. So however you choose to follow what Abba is saying in this video, and even after your time in prayer, I pray that you would do it heartily unto the Most High, with Amunah, okay? Obey the Father, do what he's calling you to do, and let him baruch you for your faithfulness. We've come to the end of this Torah Tidbit for today. I thank you for joining me. I thank you for your attentiveness, and I thank you for taking these matters before the Father in prayer and seeing what he says to you, okay? All praises to the Most High Yahuwah. All praises. May the Most High Yahuwah baruch and keep you, brothers and sisters, bless and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may he lift up his countenance upon you and grant you shalom, peace in every area of your life. And I pray that Yahuwah would continue to reveal to us the elements of our culture that have been lost to us. I pray that he would continue to help us to understand why we're called to do certain things when we don't understand. I pray that he would continue to grant us understanding as he guides us along the narrow way to life. All praises to the Most High Yahuwah. Until next time, brothers and sisters, shalom, shalom.